When we first meet Jojen Reed, one of the things that we learn about him is that he knows the day he's going to die. This is an important character trait of Jojen's, and it's something that's been shown to him in his green dreams. We see the dire wolves get a little bit aggressive towards Jojen, and he says that he doesn't need to worry about them because this is not the day that he dies. But then he does climb up into a tree to get away from them anyway, perhaps because his green dreams haven't told him whether or not he spends the rest of his life with a dire wolf inflicted injury. Jojen and Mira actually argue over the green dreams and whether or not Jojen can fight his fate. Jojen is saying that the green dreams don't lie and that this is the way that things have to be, whereas Mira is telling him to fight and to try to stay alive. I would say that the reaction Mira has is probably the reaction that most of us would have. If we had a dream that told us the day that we were going to die, I think most of us would probably try to avoid that. Yet here is Jojen going right ahead with the plan that's been shown to him by his green dreams, even if he knows it's going to cost him his life. And this brings up a really interesting question. If you were the three-eyed crow and you were the one sending these visions, why would you tell Jojen that it's going to cost him his life? We see Bran is being kept in the dark about plenty of things. He's brought north not really knowing what's going to happen. He gets to the cave still thinking that a wizard is going to fix his legs and he'll be able to walk again. Bran has been kept completely in the dark about what the actual plans for him are once he gets up to the cave. So we have a three-eyed crow here who's willing to manipulate people and willing to sort of mislead them to get them into positions that he needs them to be in. So why on earth did he tell Jojen what's going on? Especially if you take into account the Jojen paste theory, which would say that Jojen has already died. He knew that he was coming all this way north just to be turned into a paste to be fed to Bran. So, if you were willing to lie to get one of the kids up to the cave, why not just lie to the other one? It doesn't really seem to make any sense. Especially considering Jojen was the one who you needed to get Bran up there in the first place. I mean, if you were trying to recruit someone for a mission that could cost them their life, you probably don't want to outright tell them, hey, I can see the future and I know this will in fact cost you your life. Like, that would make, like, say, military recruitment a little bit harder if you could see the future and any recruit could just ask, hey, bud, do I die in this whole war thing that you're sending me to? And you have to be like, yeah, you do. Well, do you think that the chances of those people signing up would go down? Because I think the chances would go down quite a bit. But yet, when they need to recruit Jojen, that's exactly the strategy that they go with. So hopefully you're on the same page with me now about how weird it is that you would tell Jojen that this is going to cost him his life, and now we can go into the explanation that I think sort of explains all of this, and also has some interesting implications for the future of the story. So I think some things that we can hopefully agree on is that telling Jojen that this plan will cost him his life is going to make him less likely to want to go through with the plan, and that the person who is sending these dreams and visions does have a plan, like there is a plan in place. So, the fact that they would tell Jojen about this, even though it makes the plan less likely to succeed, probably means that Jojen, knowing that he's going to die, is for some reason or another actually important to the plan itself. You just wouldn't take that unnecessary risk of lowering the chances of success if it wasn't actually important. And I think that there's a pretty good reason that Jojen knowing he's going to die could actually end up being important. The key, I think, to understanding why Jojen was told about his own death and why everything is playing out in this way is going to come down to the magical difference between sacrifice and self sacrifice. We've seen tons of examples of George establishing that sacrifice does have magical power in Westeros. There is essentially life energy that is magical energy that by sacrificing someone, you can use that magical energy for some sort of spell. And this obviously leads to some pretty bad incentives for society. You could say some downright evil incentives where essentially you are sacrificing other people's lives for your own magical power. This is something that very clearly works magically in Westeros. It's something that obviously, if you want to harness magical power, you can do, but I don't think it's something that George is going to end the story saying, yes, this is the lesson. It is a good idea to sacrifice others to gain power for yourself. I would say a pretty good example of what I think George has to say about sacrificing others can be taken from what we see happen with Shireen in the show. That is probably the most notable storyline that leads towards a massive, emotional sacrifice of somebody else to achieve your goals. And it completely backfires on Stannis. It costs him everything, and in the end, he fails anyway. I think that George is definitely going to make a pretty solid statement by the end of these books that sacrifice of this nature is not a good thing to be doing. I think that the reason that it does have magical power in his world is just because, well, that's sort of realistic, right? Like, if you are in charge of society and you can get other people to sacrifice their energy, their life, whatever it is, towards your goals, that's going to make you very powerful. But it's also maybe not going to make you the best person, depending on how you use those people and how you use that power. So, this is sort of like a real life struggle that people have with systems of power and things like that. This is something that I've kind of talked about a lot. I think George has done a really good job of building his magic and his world in such a way that the sort of magical structures sort of mirror societal structures that we have in our real world. And I think this sort of like ability to sacrifice people's life energy as a leader in society, as one of these kings, you can sacrifice people to the weirwoods to power up the magical power of the old gods, which is the thing that gives you your old godsy warging powers, right? So, like, the leaders are sacrificing the small folk to uphold the system that gives the leaders the power. That's sort of the sacrificial magical system that has been running Westeros for a long time. I think that this entire system is essentially going to be replaced by the end of this story. I think that the Long Night is basically a sort of Armageddon Ragnarok sort of resetting the cycle of the world, and what will emerge from the ashes is going to require the rebirth of a new system. I've gone into this a lot in past videos and have some future videos in the works that are also going to be covering this more in detail, so make sure you subscribe for that, and I'll try not to go too far off topic in this video. But basically, I do think that the old system is essentially functioning through the Weirwoods as a giant magical conduit, and there's probably some sort of world tree like system that is the core of all of this magic. And I think that's the thing that needs to be repaired, and Bran is probably going to have a major role in that. But the whole point here is that if that entire old system is based on the magical sacrifice of others, and you do on some level need probably some magical sacrifice to get the system working, well, how do you get that to happen and avoid a situation where you just end up in the exact same system? A system that is driven constantly by bloody sacrifice of other people. Well, the answer to this is something that we've been given in mythologies that we know George has drawn inspiration from. Obviously, Norse mythology has its fingerprints all over A Song of Ice and Fire, and in Norse mythology you have Odin sacrificing his eye at the World Tree to gain magical knowledge. He also ends up hanging himself from the World Tree, and so this whole theme of self sacrifice tied to the World Tree is just very directly right there in Norse mythology. There is also, of course, the story of Jesus, where Jesus comes down and through his self sacrifice literally creates a new covenant. This is exactly what I think is basically happening. There is a new way for the world that is being born, and the way that it's being born is going to be based on self sacrifice of some people who are willingly trying to make a better world for everyone, rather than the bloody sacrifice of the small folk for the power of the people in charge. If the sacrifice of Jojen is truly laying down the magical building blocks for a new world and a better system, well, then he has to be told that he's going to die. It has to be something that he's willingly choosing to do. If he wasn't aware of what was going on, then this would just be another bloody murder to gain magical power or to achieve some ends by someone like Bloodraven. But if you tell him exactly what's going on and he's willingly giving up his life to create a better world for humanity in the future, well, then suddenly you have thrown him onto more of the Jesus archetype, and suddenly this is looking like a lot better of a magical system and a better magical sacrifice than it would be otherwise. Jojen knowingly going to his death and becoming a part of this magical sacrifice could in fact make all of the difference in the end. I've already brought up the magical power of self sacrifice in mythology, but just to take a look at a very similar example in a very popular story from modern times, just look at Harry Potter. In the beginning, it's a mystery how Harry could have possibly survived the Avada Kedavra curse when no one else has been able to do so. And it turns out in the end that the answer was Voldemort gave Lily the choice to survive, and she willingly chose to give up her life to protect Harry when she had the option not to. This cast a magical spell over Harry that made all the difference in saving his life. It was this choice of self sacrifice that cast this magical power, in a way that it wouldn't have if the person wasn't willingly choosing to die. In the story of Jesus, too, before he dies, he has this moment where he's in the garden praying and he basically asks God to spare him of this fate. He wants to get out of the crucifixion, but in the end, it's what's required of him, so he decides to self sacrifice and go through with it. But this is a choice that he makes. I think that this is the reason that Jojen was told he's going to die before he set out on his journey. Because in the recipe that is the magical Jojen paste that's doing whatever it needs to do to Bran so that he can be ready when, the world tree needs to be rebirthed is what I think's going to happen. In any case, the magical recipe of Jojen paste requires Jojen to be knowingly going into the Jojen paste. He needs to knowingly self-sacrifice in order for whatever magical spell Bloodraven and the children are cooking up to work. I think there's enough precedent for this in mythology and storytelling overall, as well as it just making a lot of good sense with the theming that George has set up around sacrifice in these books, and it really just is the most logical explanation for why on earth you would tell Jojen that he's going to die. I also really like what this does to the dynamic between Jojen and Mira, because many people take a look at their little back and forth about the green dreams never lying and not fighting your fate, and ask, is A Song of Ice and Fire a world where people have free will or is it deterministic? And I think that it is definitely a world where people have free will. If you just listen to the way that George talks about his characters and how he keeps trying to make them do what he wants them to do, but they have a mind of their own, well, it's pretty clear that his characters on some level or another have free will. It's also just one of the things that makes these books so interesting and worth reading is all of the different character choices that they're making. If they didn't have any free will at all, it would definitely cheapen the experience a little bit. I would say that one of the strongest arguments against the characters having free will was all of Jojen's talk about not being able to fight his fate, how the green dreams don't lie, and how it would seem that these visions from the Weirwoods are showing true visions of the future. How can you reconcile that with a world where people have free will? This is an entire discussion that probably does deserve its own video, and I think it's going to be one of my videos coming out pretty soon, where I'm going to talk about that whole scene with Daemon and his big vision in the end of House of the Dragon Season 2, and how that sort of spawned a lot of conversation about whether or not these characters have free will. It's certainly an interesting conversation when you see a character like Damon who is seemingly trying to make up his mind about something, and then all of a sudden he's shown visions of the future that seem to influence his decisions. If you have a power somewhere that is able to send dreams and visions and influence the decision making of people all over the world to get whatever timeline they need to work out, well, then do people really have free will? I think that's definitely worth exploring and taking a look at a few different examples that are relevant in the books, but as I said, that's probably bigger than just a tangent at the end of this video, so maybe it'll have to be the thing that I cover next time. As it applies to Jojen, though, it would really be an interesting look at the dynamic between him and Mira if you realize, oh, he does have the free will to ignore the green dreams. He does know that he is going to go and be turned into Jojen paste if he goes through with this, but he's going through with it anyway. It's a choice by Jojen and a self sacrifice that he's willingly making because he does have free will, and he's telling Mira he can't fight against it because he knows that his self sacrifice is going to be important to saving the world. I'm not saying that we know for sure that this is the case. It's possible that Jojen just completely does think that his fate is unavoidable, and he may think that he doesn't have a choice in the matter, but I think it would make it a much more interesting story if he did actually have the choice, and he was choosing to go through with this self-sacrifice, and perhaps he's just telling Mira his fate is set because she loves him and she would be trying to talk him out of it if she thought there was any chance to do so. So to make it easier on himself and on her, he's just telling her, hey, this is the way it's going to be. So that's my take on the little mystery of why exactly you would even tell Jojen he was going to die, if that was a mystery that people wondered about. It was definitely something that I had wondered about, and after thinking about it for a while, this is what I've got. Let me know if you agree with this, or if any better explanations popped into your head while you were listening to this, or just any good thoughts you've had while watching. Thank you very much for making it to the end of this. Remember to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll be back with something else very soon.